This is Red Ice Radio, a beacon of sanity from Northern Europe. RedIceCreations.com.
Welcome back, everyone. It's good to be able to talk to you again. I'm Henrik Palmgren, and I do hope you are well and that you managed to get some things done on this rock. Some good things, things that matter. It indeed is a crazy time, lots of fun and lots of problems. We currently have a full moon, and there's been some solar storms raging in the last few days. And I think most people who are not aware of the fact that they should take it a little easier in those times are unconsciously lashing out their own shadow projections in different ways. I'm sure you've been able to observe it in your surrounding as well. It's interesting to watch. Analyzing things from different perspectives gives us a wider lens through which we can see a bigger picture. That is what this program is about. We consider it to be essential in these times. You can get much more of that at redicecreations.com. Radio, TV, commentary, news, and much more. Today we're talking to Paul Levy. He's been with us 2 times before, last time in 2008. Paul early on pursued a career in art, and in 1981, due to an intense personal trauma, he had a life-changing spiritual awakening in which he began to recognize the dreamlike nature of reality. During the first year of his spiritual emergence, Paul was hospitalized a number of times, and he was told he was having a severe psychotic break from reality. Fortunately, he was able to extricate himself from the medical and psychiatric establishment that did not realize that he was taking part in a mystical awakening, a shamanic initiation process. After the trauma of his shamanic breakdown or breakthrough, he became a certified art teacher. Due to his intense interest in the work of Carl Jung, by the end of the decade he found himself the manager of the C.G. Jung Foundation book service in New York. Paul has developed a unique and creative vehicle to introduce people to the dreamlike nature of reality that he calls the dreaming up process, which is based on the realization that the same dreaming mind that dreams our dreams at night is dreaming our life. Paul says our species is clearly in the middle of a mass psychic epidemic, which he calls malignant egophrenia, and Native American calls Wetiko psychosis. There is a psycho-spiritual disease of the soul, whose origin is within ourselves, that has the potential to either destroy our species or wake us up, depending on whether or not we recognize what it is revealing to us. Keep on listening for more. Welcome back, Paul. Long time since we last spoke, actually back in 2007, but it's good to have you back with us once again. Thank you, first of all, for coming on and taking the time talking with us here today, Paul.
Oh, I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. This is going to be interesting. It was interesting we had you back in 2007 as well and talked about your first book at that time, The Madness of George W. Bush, a reflection of a collective psychosis. Really important stuff when it comes to some of the things pertaining to looking inward instead of just constantly outward, of course. And I guess I'd like to ask you a little bit about some of the basics here in the beginning about your new book, Wetiko,
Sure.
And how it differs or if it basically takes on from your first book, Paul.
Sure. Well, yeah, one of the main differences is that it's not focusing on Bush, which I'm very grateful, for. But it very much has to do with that book on Bush, because basically in that first book, I actually gave a name to this non-local disease of the soul that I was actually having the recognition of. It was informing the whole field, the whole body politic, and it was being, in a way, you could say, incarnated in the figure of Bush. And I gave it the name malignant egophrenia, or, ME disease, me disease for short, because it's really pointing at it's some sort of it's this misidentification of who we're imagining we are. And when the book came out, then I became more familiar. Indigenous cultures were tracking the exact same disease, and they had a whole mythology around it. And so with the new book that I wrote, I actually, in a way, I'm just translating the sort of the Native American wisdom traditions, their perspective on Wetiko or Wetiko, however one says it, it really varies. You know, but how that's actually the exact same thing that I was trying to point at with malignant egophrenia, and that it actually pervades the whole field. And it's something that's informing, you know, that has to do with all of us, that, you know, there's not any of us who are free of it. And it's just an incredibly interesting contemplation when you actually discover it's kind of like this mind parasite, or like, you know, well, I mean, I have a lot of metaphors for it. We can talk about that as we unfold this discussion. But it's, I guess the thing I want to say that really was the most interesting for me was that in this particular sort of psycho-spiritual dis-ease of the soul that was in my first book that I wrote about in Bush, and then in the current book, I had the realization, oh wow, encoded in the disease it's actually potentially helping us to wake up to who we are. But if we don't have the recognition in a way of what it's showing us, then it's going to kill us. Then it is destroying our species, and we're destroying ourselves. So it's like it's a quantum situation that encoded in the pathology is both the incredible poison and the medicine, and it all is a function of if we actually see what's being revealed to us.
Is this something you would say that we are born with, Paul, or is it an environmental disease because of our upbringing, because of something, the way we live our lives? Is it something you attract and it kind of spreads, I think, throughout our own individual system, if you will, as we get older? Or how do you see it, Paul?
Yeah, I would, you know, it's a very interesting contemplation, because it seems like it's actually part of who we are, and yet it's like the inhuman part of who we are, because it actually informs our inhumanity to our fellow beings. Yet it's actually part of our nature that, you know, in the same way, like, you know, think about the mythology of the Garden of Eden, and, you know, when with Adam and Eve, the snake was already there prior. It wasn't like they first created the snake. That was actually part of the whole environment. In the same way that this evil Wetiko, whatever you would call it, you know, there are a lot of different names for it, that it's sort of like this a priori existent phenomena. And, you know, but the thing which is interesting is that, so it's a really, you see, the thing which, you know, it's such a hard question to answer, because the thing about this virus, this mind virus, it's like a virus, is that it doesn't actually have any objective existence. In the same way that when you think about, you know, like, say, for example, in Tibetan Buddhism, they'll talk about emptiness. They'll say, oh, you know, things don't intrinsically, independently exist, separate from your own mind. Same thing in a dream. The forms of the dream don't exist intrinsically, independently, separate from the consciousness of the dreamer. Same thing with Wetiko, that it doesn't exist in an objective form. But if we just think, oh, well, this thing, Wetiko, it doesn't exist, then I shouldn't pay any heed to it, then we've fallen under its thrall. But if we think it does exist, and if we think it exists objectively, and then we fight it, then we've fallen under its thrall. So the thing is, the actual built into the phenomena of Wetiko, it creates this conundrum in our psyche, because it operates through the psyche. And just even to add one more dimension of just, you know, kind of whatever, just how it's such an interesting phenomena, is that it's the psyche through which we're investigating Wetiko, while at the same time Wetiko operates through the channel of the psyche. So, like, if I can just say really succinctly, because I figured out because people always ask me, well, what is Wetiko? And I never know what to say, because it's this trippy phenomena that it doesn't, you know, it's not easy to find words for.
Right.
But in essence, one way of understanding it, it's a form of psychic blindness, that not only does it believe itself to be sighted, but arrogantly it imagines itself to be seeing more clearly than anybody else. And that's, in a sense, one way of really describing concisely what Wetiko is.
Tell us about the word first. What does that mean, and why did you give it this name?
Yeah, well, okay. There's a book, Columbus and Other Cannibals, by Jack Forbes, and he's this Native American scholar who just passed away like a number of weeks before my book came out. So I actually, he's the book I've just dedicated to him and his work. And in the book, he actually brings out this term Wetiko, which is an indigenous term. The Cree Indians, it's in their language, and it's in depending on the tradition, like it's either called Wendigo, or it's just, they have all these different names depending on the tribe. But he brings it out in Columbus and Other Cannibals, and he actually translates it into somewhat of a modern idiom as being the psychological disease that, and the current incarnation of it is the multinational corporation, and it's devouring. The indigenous people would call it cannibal sickness, because it's basically, this energy that actually takes over people and they consume. So they'll actually like consume, in a way, other people or the environment without taking anything back. And so that's in a way, and of course, I mean, the whole, in my book, I really unfold more of the etymology and the mythology of the word. But the thing which is interesting about Wetiko, I mean, there are so many things. It is the trippiest concept, because when you contemplate it, you see, it's not a personal energy. It's what's called either a transpersonal energy, an archetypal energy, or what's called daimonic energy. And the daimonic is an energy that actually can possess the ego and take one over. And when that happens, one doesn't have any awareness that one is possessed. And then one just becomes an instrument to act out this deeper daimonic energy. And so the thing is that when somebody is in a way kind of taken over by Wetiko, they have no idea of their condition. They don't have any awareness of how sick they are. And it's contagious in that, it operates, like I was saying, via the unconscious psyche, but through the blind spot. And a person who's taken over by Wetiko, because they're in a way channeling this daimonic energy, they can have like a certain charm or charisma that can easily entrance other people into, their, in a way, archetypal spin or their point of view. So it's very much like some sort of hypnotic, it's like a spell that's being cast, and it's a collective psychosis. So you see, because of that, you can't even understand Wetiko without understanding that there's a non-local field that we're all contained in and that we're actually interconnected in. But the thing which is interesting, because there are so many ways of unfolding this, in that daimonic energy, the word daimon, it actually, the real inner meaning is the guiding spirit or the inner voice. And it's related to hearing a voice, to finding one's calling, one's vocation, to the genius. All of that etymologically has to do with the daimon. And the point is that if we honor that daimonic energy that's within us, that's not, a personal energy, it's a transpersonal archetypal energy, then we actually discover our genius and our true calling and our vocation, and we connect with our inner guidance, and then we're able to channel that daimonic energy constructively in a creative way, and we become, in a way, these artists, and our canvas is life itself. But if we don't honor that daimonic energy and we turn away from it, that daimonic energy turns negative and becomes a demon. And that's Wetiko, and then we become taken over by it, right. And we just become instruments for it, and we act it out unknowing to ourselves. So in a sense, we become these, like a secret agent, and our secret is secret even to ourselves.
So it's our shadow, maybe, in one sense, we could say, and if we don't recognize that shadow, if we don't learn to work with it, if we suppress it, it turns on us to get our, maybe not more than the attention, of course, but what happens during that transformation? Why does it turn on us, do you think?
Yeah. Well, no, you're totally right on with the shadow, because I in the book I talk about, from the psychological point of view, it's encoded in the shadow. And what'll happen, to the extent that we're not really in touch with our own shadow, of course, then what do? We throw it outside of us, have the projection of the shadow onto someone else. And then, you see, the one way of understanding this is because, okay, and this is important too with understanding Wetiko, because I was saying you can't really even see it without understanding the field, that there's a non-local field. But then one other way of understanding it too is to see that